There is a lot to worry about in the world right now. There's COVID, there's inflation, the climate change, also recent mass shootings. And now more than ever, mental health professionals are warning about compassion fatigue. Joining me right now, psychologist and executive coach, Dr. Lisa Orbe-Austin. Hey, Lisa.
Hi, Natalie.
So we have to tell people out there first, obviously, what is compassion fatigue?
So compassion fatigue is the psychological, emotional, and physical impact of having to help somebody else or care for somebody else, especially people who have trauma, have distress or illness. You typically see it in caregivers, whether it's childcare workers, parents. You also see it in healthcare workers, mental health workers. So anybody who has to be responsible for somebody else's well-being.
Now, how is compassion fatigue different from burnout?
So they have a similarity in the sense that both of them are as a result of exposure to some form of work. But compassion fatigue largely has to do with caregiving or taking care of somebody else and the fatigue that comes from that.
So what are some of the signs or warning signs, really, that we should be looking out for?
Yeah, so you should look for feelings of irritability and reactivity, especially for the people that you care for or having to care for somebody. Also feelings of numbness and detachment when you hear something that should cause some kind of reaction, you just feel numb or disconnected. I think also, too, you can be ruminating about suffering or getting stuck on issues of suffering, and also alternatively looking at people who are suffering and making them personally responsible for their suffering.
Now,
So
a lot of this you said is caregivers out there. How can we prevent or try to treat this or maybe help someone that we see kind of going through that?
So I think most immediately you want to think about, can you get a break from the caregiving? Either if it's work, can you take a vacation? Can you take PTO time? If it is personal, can somebody else also step into this responsibility and give you a time to kind of step back and take a break? I think that's really important. And then I think thinking about, like, how do you prioritize your self-care? How do you think about when you return back to the caregiving, what do you need around you? What kind of supports and structure and boundaries do you need around it? And then I think if you're not feeling relieved from the boundaries that you're setting or the things that you're able to do, I'm thinking about getting professional help, because there could be other things going on, like vicarious trauma, that can be something that needs professional support around.
Now, how aware of this should we be, considering we're never going to see a perfect world? We're always going to have something going on, but is it hyper right now? Is there more of that going on, so this is coming up more often, or is this something that we just didn't notice before the pandemic?
I mean, I think, there's a lot going on in the world. And I think, also we're exposed to a lot of media around it. So we're getting a lot more regular exposure to it. And I think it's really also managing that exposure, because that can really help, especially when you're feeling overloaded, to kind of not necessarily watch the news all the time or be paying attention to these things on social media. But I think our exposure to it really does matter. And we really need to be careful about that.
All right. Thank you for your insight, as always, Dr. Lisa. You guys can follow her at Dr. Orbe-Austin on Instagram, and then we'll see you again here next week.